the stream is up. Andrew, take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. Again, welcome to the St. Catharines Heritage Advisory Committee Designation Subcommittee meeting for Friday, October 18th, 2024. It's now 2:30 and we have quorum, so I'd like to call the meeting to order. And we can begin this gathering by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe people, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Acknowledging this reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous peoples. So now we move to today's agenda. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Okay, don't appear to be any. So who would like to make a motion to approve the agenda? Robert moves that the designation subcommittee adopt the agenda for this meeting held on Friday, October 17th, 2024. Copies having been previously distributed. All in favor?
And that would be me as well.
All right, so the motion carries, and we move on to the minutes for the previous meeting, which was on March 22nd, 2024. So for anyone who has a really good memory, and I had to check the minutes to remind myself that I actually wasn't at that meeting, so I can't comment on it. But does anyone have any comments, questions, or changes in regards to those minutes? Okay, it looks like none. So I would ask that someone make a motion to adopt the minutes for the March 2022 meeting.
I would be delighted to do that.
We'll go with Brian, who moves that the designation subcommittee approve the minutes of the meeting held on Friday, March 22nd, 2024. In favor? All right, so that carries as well. The minutes have been approved. Next, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest in regards to this meeting? I think I have one, which is one of the properties we're going to be talking about is actually property that I purchased. So I'm the owner of the property, which is the St. Paul Crescent properties we're going to be talking about later on. So we'll talk more about that then. But just to let everyone know that I have obviously an interest in that property. So moving on to business, item 7.1, we're going to do a designation prioritization recap, and Lauren is going to walk us through that, remind us all where we were when we last met.
Okay, just going to share my screen. Confirm that everyone can see my screen. Is that good? How about now?
There we go.
There we go. Excellent. Good. So first of all, I apologize. I realized that I had October 17th written on everything, and today's definitely October 18th, so I'll have to fix that. But just in the meantime, let me just pull this up. There we go. All right, so since it's been a little while since everyone is gathered, and also since I am new and need to get up to speed with the work that you have all been working on for the last little while, I just put together a little recap, background, some information on the work we've done so far, and just to kind of refresh everyone and look at moving forward with the designation of some of the register items that have been identified as being a priority. So this is me, the new heritage planner. One of the most important things that has happened since you last met is that Bill 200 has been passed on June 6, 2024. as a part of the Homeowner Protection Act. And basically what Bill 200 does is, in the heritage context, is it extended the deadline for designating properties on the register that were determined to have cultural heritage value or interest. Basically, before we had very, very strict deadlines, and now we have a bit more breathing room. So we actually have until January 1st, 2027 to address some of these properties, to evaluate them, and determine if they need to either stay on the or become designated or be removed from the register. After January 1st, 2027, any of the legacy properties on the register will be removed from the register, and they cannot be relisted for 5 years after that. And so, I mean, it's good news because we have an extension of our timelines. But, you know, also we still have to focus on evaluating some of these properties and making sure that when that deadline hits, that everything that is significant and important has been evaluated and either determined to meet 906 or not meet 906. So just a quick recap of the work that has been done to date. Initially, 60 properties were considered for prioritization on the Heritage Register. 32 properties were identified by this committee as being priorities, being properties that you felt were important to do some more research on and to do that evaluation. Since those 32 properties were identified, 3 owners have reached out and have indicated that they are not interested in designation. And those are properties at 123 Albert, 180 Ontario, and 301 Queenston. And so just, you know, how we do things here at City of St. Catharines is we won't be pursuing designation for those properties. James had looked at one property on the priority list, 193 Vine Street, and after doing a bit of digging and research and taking a look at the architecture and you know, closer look at what currently the state of the building, determined that it was very unlikely or did not meet 906. And there is one property on the list currently being evaluated. That's 3 Elizabeth Street, and we'll have a little update on that later. And then we are also currently working on designating the properties, St. Paul Crescent properties, which is the properties that Andrew mentioned earlier. They were included in the prioritization, but were identified as properties that there's interest in being designated. So they're a part of the scope of work for this committee. And just quickly, this is the 193 Vine Street that James took a look at. I don't know if anyone has any questions specifically for James, but as from what I understand, it was found to not meet 906. So, yeah. Great. And that's my update. Let's recap.
If it helps for me to jump in about this property in particular. So 183 Vine, I mean, we based on how we scored it previously, earlier in the year, you know, physical value, like I think we definitely found that it was representative of like an Ontario cottage style. And I found that certainly was the case. It kind of has all the you know, features you would expect to see in that type of building. Unfortunately, that porch at the front originally had up until 2019 or 20 had a much more ornate and original porch to it, which probably would have been what we would have leaned on for craftsmanship. But that porch is a new porch built in the last couple of years, unfortunately, and so kind of eroded that argument. And apart from that, there isn't a lot else to lean on from a craftsmanship perspective, in terms of exceptionality. Its history, I couldn't find anything that, you know, suggested that there was a lot of significance there from a historical perspective, and the contextual value. It's very much kind of on its own in the on Vine Street. There isn't a lot around it that is kind of contextually linked to it. It's not part of a neighborhood that's all, you know, similar era or similar styles. So yeah, unfortunately, if we were going to be at best maybe we could have made an argument for a second, like a second criteria, but we really would have been stretching it, I think. And it just, I was having trouble finding a rationale for it. So I think it meets one of the 9, and I just don't think it meets that second one that's required now for demolition. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, James.
What about the carriage house or the brick building that sits behind it? Would that add any value to the context of this house?
I'd have to go back and look to see. It's been a while. It's been 6 or 7 months since I looked at this house, so I'd have to look back to see what I'd dug up about it. I don't know if it would add anything to the historical or the contextual, that especially if it's just a carriage house. Because contextual is more about the neighborhood around it, I think, really. And so you'd want to see more of that style or those types of buildings or that era around it, whereas this is very much just on this one property. And then historical value, I don't think it would have changed anything from in terms of like who lived there or what its use was or anything like that. So I don't recall thinking that the carriage house would actually help boost it up, but I'm happy to go back into my notes and take a look at that and then have that ready for the next time we meet.
Okay.
In terms of the 3 properties that the owners declined to participate in, I know those were all ones we identified as on our priority list. Were any of those 3 particularly highly rated, or you know, each of them, I think if you look at them, you can see there's merit there, but were any of them sort of top priorities? I don't remember where they fell.
I can check. I put everything here so we can take a look. It looks like from that list, there's Albert, Ontario, and 301 Queenston. 301 Queenston here, I think it was 13th. Albert was 14th. And let's see. The other property. Let's see. 180 Ontario. Where did that go? I don't see it on our list. Maybe we took it off. Oh, here it is, 180 Ontario. And that was 19th. So not in the top 10. And then none of them, but yeah, definitely of the 30, kind of above the in the top 20, I guess.
Yeah, assuming that there's going to be no appetite to do anything, you know, at the moment with these, and also assuming that the 5-year waiting period begins after the properties removed from the registry, is there any benefit to taking those 3 properties off the registry now, beginning that 5-year count rather than waiting till January 1st, 2027, which would be, you know, another 2 years. We're really extending that window. So, but you know, by doing it now, we're sort of taking 2 years off the lifespan of the ban on putting those properties back later if we choose to. Is there any merit to that? And what's the procedure for dropping something from the registry like that?
Really interesting idea. James, I don't, so have we discussed this at all for the other non-prioritized register items too? And is that something that we could do or look at doing, just to start that 5-year time, time?
We could look into doing that for sure. We haven't, because I think just the idea that they're listed for, you know, the next 2 and a bit years. So if somebody was, you know, thinking of applying for demolition over the next 2 years, at least we knew that they were covered and that we didn't have any concerns there. In this case, based on what the 3 properties are, like the 301 Queenston in particular is a gem. Like it's such a lovely building that would have easily met 906, and the owners take very good care of their building and the property. They've won awards for their gardens and stuff like that, I believe. And so they're good stewards of their property. So I don't imagine that there will be much interest on their end to be demolishing anytime soon. So maybe for that one, we'd be okay with that. When they came forward and said that they were interested or not interested in being designated, they requested that they be removed. And I said, well, our right now, because of the amount of properties involved and the work involved in our priorities, we were just going to let the time run out. And so at the time, we thought that would be, much sooner than what it is now, right? So they didn't have any concerns about that. We didn't bring the idea back to them and say, oh, you know what, it's been listed for an extra 2 years because of the changes that the province have made. So I'm sure if we did go forward and said, we'd like to delist this property now, they would probably have no concerns about that idea. The other two, 180 Ontario is a very nice building. I don't know if in the conversations that I had with the owner, I don't recall I didn't get the sense that there was an interest in demolition there either. And same thing with the property on Albert Street. I didn't get any sense of that as well. So if we felt that there was no concerns, then yeah, we could, or no imminent concerns, I guess, we could move to delist them now. And then, take a stab at it 5 years from now. We'd be looking at almost 2029 at that point. Yeah, so we could explore that. We haven't had any experience with doing that so far. We haven't delisted anything. So what we would have to do is basically bring that to the Heritage Committee and bring the whole idea of delisting to them, let them know which properties and why, and then they would make a recommendation to council, and then council essentially would have to delist the properties. My guess is that if the Heritage Committee had no concerns about that idea, then council probably would agree. That's typically how it has operated in this, but yeah, it's a foreign. We haven't had the opportunity to delist something in quite a while, so it's I don't know if there would be any grander concerns from council about that, but I think the rationale is sound. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I think the Queenston one is sort of the most unique of these, but it sounds like if something's going to happen there, it's more likely to happen after 3 years from now rather than or after 5, then within the next 2 years. So that's sort of part of the rationale for it. And then when you look at the other two, I think the one that would possibly face the most risk would be the Ontario Street one because of its location. It's beside it's right near a busy corner. It's beside a vacant lot. That's the one I think that has the most development potential, that site. So it would be most likely to, and so leaving it on gives it some degree of protection. At the same time, if we look at it and say, well, if the demolition permit comes in, we're not going to be able to make a case that the council's going to block the demolition in favor of designation, then again, the protection of being registered has no teeth anyway. So
yeah, no, it's true. I guess what we would be able to do though is at least write a report to council so the Heritage Committee would be able to say, we think there is value here. Ultimately, it's council's decision whether or not to designate or not, right? So their priorities might say, you know what, if depending on the proposal, like if it's a development proposal, they might view that more favorably, right? So yeah, it would really depend on whether or not the committee felt it was important to be able to voice their opinion on those properties at least,
right.
And be able to at least present an argument. That's assuming it meets 906 as well, right? So we're making assumptions that it would meet the criteria for designation.
Yeah, and we can't know that unless we do it, and probably our time is spent better on the other properties than on this one. So
yeah,
just some things to think about. Thank you for indulging me.
Yeah, Lauren and I can chat about it a little bit afterwards and see if we can figure out what might make sense. And I think the other thing too is understanding maybe what other municipalities are doing in this area. I know some places were really proactively delisting properties to be able to get that 5-year timeline started more sooner because they knew that they weren't going to be able to tackle all of them, right? But just finding out what the best practices and what other places are doing, I think would be really, really helpful to us. So
yeah, we can do that definitely. Yep.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on the prioritization recap?
I was just wondering, Seeing we've got the time extension until 2027, when's our next provincial election coming up? Is that in 26? Like, how is that going to impact on uh, the appointment of a new heritage committee if we haven't finished all our work up yet?
Hmm.
Is that going to have any, negative impact?
So it looks like it's tentatively scheduled for June 4th, 2026. So it'd be we'd have 6 months after that to basically finish this project. So there we would have I think our committee would still be able to sit. There's no concerns about that, I don't think. I mean the permit committee previously was able to sit even though the actual heritage committee wasn't, right? Previously.
Oh,
So
interesting. Yeah.
yeah. Because it's a I wouldn't say it's a legislative requirement, but because they have essentially a role to play in the process, right? So I think it's important that they would still be able to exist and do their job.
So our work won't be impacted then.
I don't think so. I don't think there's any reason to suspect that, but at the same time, we can always ask our clerks department, and find out if
Okay,
they have any
thanks.
concerns about that.
Maybe a good idea to factor that into our planning though, at least, so we're not pushing things to the end,
Mhm.
just in case. Okay, anyone else? Robert, is your hand up there?
Yes, you're asking about an election. It is the mandate is to run till late 26, but there is talk of the current government going prematurely, dropping the writ simply because of it may be advantageous to their long-term health. So I would suggest you can't really look at that date of the fall of 26. You might look at a year or so earlier, even more, or even earlier than that, based on the political people I talked to.
And actually, sorry, I was thinking about the election that we had in 2022, the municipal election when we elected a new mayor and council. That's what caused caused us to have to put the heritage committee on hiatus.
I thought you were
So
asking about the provincial
well, that's
government.
yeah, that's what Brian had asked about, I think. But I was thinking about that like very directly, but then it occurred to me that actually the heritage committee had to disband because of the election, the municipal election when we elected the mayor and
Right.
council, and so that triggered a new committee, which unfortunately didn't meet for a few months afterwards, right? So, but the heritage permit committee though throughout that process still existed, and I think that would still be the case here. The next municipal election wouldn't be until probably October 2026.
Mhm.
And I think we could assume the committee would continue to exist for at least a couple months after that, so close to the
Yeah.
end of the year anyway.
Yeah.
So,
Good to consider.
okay. Good. Anything else? Anyone? I think we can move on to item 7.2, which is the ongoing research. And Lauren, do you want to review that for us, please?
Well, I think just talked briefly about Andrew, where 3 Elizabeth Street might be at. Yeah, so where as far as like the status of that.
Most of the research has been done, Brian. This sort of got left when I was absent for a while, but Brian did the land registry research, and I've done a lot of some background research on the family and occupancy of the house, beyond just the ownership, and it's just a matter of compiling that into one concise place for everyone to look at. But we had spoken about potential dates to bring forward those properties and what the timeline would be to make sure we had that report. And so we have all the pieces to put that together.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of setting a deadline, and then I got to stick to it.
Yeah. Do we need to go and do field work or take updated photos or anything like that? Or what do we usually, what because I haven't been involved, what do we usually do for working as a team on this?
The most recent photos we have are from 2022, so it's probably not a bad idea to update them.
Okay, cool.
But I don't know what the normal practice is around that either. So
yeah. Oh, well, it's either something that I could do and go take a day and get updated photos for things, or we could talk to the committee about their capacity and if anyone wants to go out for a nice walk and take some photos. It's really something that we can talk about collaborating on so that we can get all the pieces together to finish the evaluation for this one. Yeah. Sounds good. And I guess the other property or group of properties is 145 St. Paul Crescent properties. And Brian, you're taking a look at doing some of the research for that.
Yeah, I tried to dig up my notes for this, and they've been swallowed up by my desk. I'll have to dig a bit deeper to find them again. But basically, the ownership of this property came through the Thomas Rodman Merritt estate. Like it was part of the overall Rodman Hall property, and these got severed off at a fairly early date. I think I came to the conclusion they were built between about 1881 and 1883 or something like that. And of course, then went to the Voisard family, who had a grocery store there for many, many years. So all I have to do, the same as Andrew's property or that he was looking at on Elizabeth, is to just write something up and present it to the committee.
Sounds good. And this, with this, I assume we can get even more up-to-date photos, Andrew. You're at the property.
absolutely.
Have all the documentation for that.
We also have a lot
great.
more historic photos coming too, because we're in
yeah.
contact with the Voisard family, who's interested in seeing this
Yeah.
property get taken care of. And
So,
sorry.
So just as like a process for this committee, if you put together the evaluation and it was determined to meet 906, would we put together a presentation for the regular Heritage Committee, and then would that go to council? Or is that what your process usually is, or does it go straight from this committee to council?
No, it would go this committee, then
this committee, Heritage Committee,
and then
the
council.
Okay, some really cool historic photos would be great for that for that presentation. That'd be great.
Just a question about these buildings, because I couldn't be there for the tour. Are there a lot of like original features inside the buildings, Andrew?
Some, because it was adapted. Let's divide that into two. On the left is the fire hall. Very, very little remaining internally, with the exception of the basements. The basements of these properties are really very cool, but most of those have been heavily renovated, and there's much in terms of internal features in there. And the others, much more so upstairs. A lot of original trim and doors and things like that, but many layers of other things. Once we get into in the new year, we're going to begin sort of our demolition renovation. We're going to do some digging through layers and so on, and you never know what we're gonna dig up. But there are a few just tucked around the back, some original windows and things like that, which are great, which gives us a little bit of evidence of what was there. And but there's nothing really earth-shattering in there, no. But it does retain a lot of the character, yeah.
I mean, at least with you being the owner of these buildings and with your knowledge of local history and everything, I'm sure that whatever you find will be carefully evaluated before it's removed. I have a little horror story about a building on Geneva Street near Church, and years ago, the owners were doing renovations on the building, and they took part of a wall down, and what they found behind it was a wall that had been covered over, and it was papered over with issues of St. Catharines newspapers from the
Wow.
1860s that were just used as like, wallpaper. And
Mhm.
the owner at the time said, well, it's just old newspaper. Who's interested in that? And they completely removed it and off it went to a dumpster.
Mhm.
I almost wanted to cry.
No, that's terrible. Yeah. You're right. You never know what you found. I'll give you another example just for fun. There's another property that we own that it's a Victorian era property, and we've been up at the Brown Homestead. We've been saving and documenting the 14, 15, 16 layers of wallpaper that we found in the ballroom up there. And there was one from the Victorian era, and the only good sample we had of it was deeply faded. And we said more than once we wish we could find a good sample of it to see what the true original colors look like. Well, lo and behold, when we were doing some renovations over at the Victorian house, back in the closet, I found a sample of that exact wallpaper, completely
Wow.
unfaded with the true colors of it and so on. So it was really uh, one of those fun little moments.
Wow. That's great.
I told Andrew this story already, but my great grandma actually lived on the second floor of the building on the right, like the far right. She had one of the little units in there in the 1940s, so or 19 maybe the late 50s actually. Sorry, so just kind of cool. My grandpa still remembers going there and whatnot, visiting her and stuff. So yeah, just a neat little
That's great.
story.
Mhm.
Great.
Yeah, anyone who is interested in seeing the property is more than welcome to. I'm there on a fairly regular basis. Just let me know if there's a good time you'd like to come and poke around, and I'd be happy to have anyone take a look who's interested.
I'd love to see it, Andrew. I always thought that this area could be like some trendy little like bookshop and coffee shops and oh, I love that little St. Paul West area.
Hmm.
It's very cool.
I'm very optimistic about where that area is going, and it certainly needs rejuvenation. And this particular property is one that I drove by for years on a regular basis and just sort of admired how much of the original fabric was left and what it could be, and just sadly watched it decay over time. And one day, a for sale sign popped up, and there's a very long story which I won't tell you that resulted 2 years later in us buying the property. But um, it's a great opportunity to do something, in an area that needs it and with a property that deserves some TLC. But it's a big it's a big daunting project, and the condition issues are a little scary in places. So the neglect is very unfortunate.
You might want to contact Dennis Gannon. I think he's got some historical photos of this block as well that he's tracked down from somewhere. So
He got those from the family. I've actually
Mm.
seen the originals of the photos that he used in his article, but I would like to talk to him because some of his research is, I think, more accurate than the family's recollections based on dates and so on.
right.
All right. So any questions about either of those properties? No? Okay, then we will move on to item 7.3, which is to talk about next steps in terms of the designation schedule and delegation of tasks. And Lauren, will take that away. Take
Great.
it away.
So I put together a couple of next steps and goals, but really they're just meant to be kind of points of consultation and communication with you to see what kind of priorities you want to set and what kind of scheduling makes sense to you as a committee. So as far as goals, I mean, I think it's reasonable to hope for the high priority properties to be evaluated by that January 1st, 2027 deadline. So that list of 30 or so, you minus what we've already evaluated and the properties that have where the owners have indicated they aren't interested in designation. And then just as a high level goal, aim for one complete evaluation per month. So, this could be, we say, one evaluation per month, but really we do three in 1 month and then wait a couple months and then, two or whatever makes sense as a rhythm. But just, making sure that there's always something in the pipeline and that we're always working on something and that we know that something is being evaluated. I think an important point is that it's not designations per month, but evaluations. So, it's reasonable to expect that some of these are not going to meet 906, and if they don't meet 906, that's good because we've done our due diligence and we determined that it doesn't qualify. So, if it doesn't necessarily mean that we'll be designating all these properties or doing a designation every month, but to be able to take one of those properties off the list or designate it as needed is important. So I guess for next steps, so I guess first through the chair of the committee, do those seem like reasonable goals? Is that something that it's what the committee wants to pursue? What are your ideas and your thoughts on that? Yeah. Any questions, concerns?
It seems to be, it seems to be a good pace that'll get us where we want to get to at the end of the year. I was going to ask, number one, if it would be possible for you to send out the list of the priority properties in order, sort of in order of rank again, because I
Yeah.
don't seem to have a copy of that. The one thing I have is older.
Yeah.
But and the other question I had was, and we talked about this before, but just for maybe for the group, is what you think is realistic in terms of getting the first group of properties to the Heritage Committee and then on to council, whichever ones qualify that we want to put forward for designation, and whether and sort of what timeline you want to follow thereafter in terms of putting forward a group of properties. How often do you want to do that?
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking, I have here under next steps, just like high level goal, to have the 3 Elizabeth Street and the St. Paul Crescent evaluations ready by the end of the year. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to committee in December, but just to have an idea of whether or not we want to designate or not by the end of the year. And then at that point, because we have until 2027, they can really go either here or to committee and to council at any time. So whether or not you want to, do put together the evaluations, ideally have it set a deadline for that, and then wait to bring maybe 2 or 3 designations to committee at the same time, or whether you want a constant flow of those. It's whatever makes sense to you. I like the idea of getting the evaluations done, knowing if we wanted to designate or not, and then at that point we can take our time and put together reporting for the committee, put together a very thorough a statement of significance and heritage attributes. But knowing that they meet and knowing that the evaluation has been completed. Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, one of the things we talked about was scheduling it around the business about the downtown HCD, which is going to be going before council, and deciding if we want to wait till after that before we put forward properties and so on. So.
And that's another thing that we should probably talk about is that the reason why we have these 60 properties and that they're being prioritized is because the vast majority of the properties in the register are within the proposed HCD that's currently being studied, and that this work has been proposed under the assumption that the properties downtown may be a part of the HCD and be designated through that process. But if that doesn't happen, then we may have to shift gears to look at some of the more high priority properties in the downtown area. James, do you have anything to say or comments on that? Because you're leading the HCD.
Yeah, so we're expecting the recommendations from or at least the first draft of the recommendations from our consultant hopefully by the end of this month. And so we'll be discussing those internally and what that might look like. And then I'll have a better idea of what a potential heritage district boundary will look like, and whether or not it includes, because you might remember the original boundary for the study is pretty big. It's most of the downtown, and I don't know if that's where the line is going to be drawn at the end of the day if the HCD comes to fruition. And so we'll have to see what properties actually are outside of that boundary and which ones make sense for us to tackle. We know a lot of the properties downtown are pretty high quality, so that's, I think it'll be easy for us to prioritize those if we want. The other thing is we've asked the heritage consultants to prioritize, like basically highlight which properties are properties we should look at as well. So if for some reason, well, if the heritage district doesn't come to fruition and council gives us direction to just look at properties individually, one, where that's a huge task, and so I don't expect that this subcommittee is going to be able to tackle the entire downtown by themselves. So we would be probably making the request to council that we would need more resources in terms of staff or getting a consultant on board to help us with that. And yeah, so we'll figure out basically when we get to that point, whatever council decides, that's going to provide us with the direction on where to go with this. But I think for now, full steam ahead with this plan. And if we need to pivot, we'll do that. But we'll also hopefully have additional resources to be able to help us with that. But yeah, it's I at this time I don't know where the Heritage District is going to go. I'm not sure. Everybody here has heard about what's been going on with it, so we'll see what happens when it goes to council early in the year, and we'll go from there.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Holly.
Okay, through the chair, just a question. Often when I'm driving through the downtown, I really wonder you hear this phrase quite often recently, demolition by neglect, and some of these vacant properties, there's why wouldn't they be like priority, these vacant properties, like the Peninsula Press building, the St. Catharines Standard building, the one on Queen Street, the old Jordan Stewart ladies store? Like they're sitting empty, these properties. Are they being inspected at all? Like is people from the city or fire departments ever inspecting these buildings?
Through the chair, I don't know the answer to that, Holly. I don't know if they're actively being inspected. I imagine if there's ever a complaint made about them, then somebody would go and take a look. In terms of whether or not we would prioritize those, we'll wait till the Heritage District study comes back, and if those properties are high on the list of properties that should be evaluated and protected, then by all means we'll make sure that they're a priority, right? So yeah, right now, but in terms of whether or not we're actively going around the downtown and figuring out are these properties being maintained adequately? No, we aren't. It's more reactive than that. It's usually, if we hear a complaint, then we'll send out a bylaw officer to find out if there's any property standards issues. It's similar to what happened with that property at 175 Main Street, the little cottage there that the like faux wood log cottage there. That was all a response to complaints rather than us proactively going out and
And the Laura Secord one recently in Queenston that was in the news, right?
All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, unfortunately, there's so many buildings in the city, and there's only so much staff, right? So from a bylaw perspective, and so they're not able to walk around the downtown and point to buildings and whatnot, and so a lot of it is reactive, unfortunately.
Like just off the topic, like I have a small property, but it's not heritage. It's a commercial small piece of property, and it's vacant now because the tenant moved out, and my insurance is like because it's vacant, they make me go every day. I have to keep a journal book, and I have to go inside the building and inspect it inside and out, and keep a log, and pay like almost double the insurance because it's vacant. So I just don't get it how these places like the Peninsula Press building can pay their taxes and insurance and keep it empty. Anyway, sorry to get sidetracked here.
No, it's a good point to make, Holly, that if we turn our attention to the downtown at all, then the properties that are at the greatest risk are of course properties that we should be looking at, right? So, and if
Yeah.
we feel that there are cases where there's demolition by neglect potential, then, you know, we should be looking at them and we should be aware of them. So I think your point is perfectly fine.
Or like a committee, maybe we can do a subcommittee, demolition by neglect.
I think maintaining a list of those properties, it wouldn't be a bad idea. And I know I'd be happy to, if there was a list of it, whenever I am downtown, to just drive by and take a peek.
The vacant
But just to
ones.
reiterate what James said, if we go back to the Welland House example, when there were concerns about how that building was being kept and windows being left open and so on, when it was raised with the city, they were very responsive to it. So I think if we can assist by providing some eyes and some references where there are obvious cases, you know, if any, hopefully none, where things are not being potentially not being cared for, I think I'm guessing we'd find the same thing, that if we brought it to their attention, they would take a look and respond.
Yeah, if you had any properties that you were really concerned about, pass them along to Lauren, and then Lauren can pass them along to our bylaw team, and they can look into it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, by all means, let us know if you see anything that looks really, really in bad shape, right?
Yeah. And I do think risk is something that should be taken into consideration when looking at the list of 30 odd properties that that we have to designate now too. That's kind of a difficult question of like, how do we prioritize the priorities? And so if that's something, especially if you have experience with these properties, you see them every day, and you say, oh, this one's at risk, or this is something that is of concern, then we should definitely use that information to prioritize what we have. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
For
Sorry, go ahead. Anything else on that?
Yeah. I guess so for next steps, a couple of things that I just wanted to discuss with you. First of all is, you know, the individual capacity of committee members for contributions to things like research, historical research or evaluation, or going out and taking a couple pictures and sending them to me, just so we can, you know, move these properties forward. I don't know about your, you know, individual workloads or, you know, what kind of capacity you have, but if just reaching out to say, you know, it's a big job, and if anyone has any interest in helping out with that, you know, we can talk about it. We can say, you know, what Brian and Andrew, you know, doing some of the research on these other properties, if that's something you want to continue to do, or, you know, what kind of roles you see suitable for you, and helping put together the evaluations going forward.
Robert?
I'd be happy to do some evaluations or research, or at least the drive-bys and pictures and things like that. I'm not the one to do the background checks and things like that. The deep research, it's really not my thing. But I'd be happy to do as much as I can possibly take on and fit in. I have quite a bit of time available, so I'm volunteering.
Okay.
I'm certainly able to tackle land registry, which is a foreign
Yes.
country for a lot of people, to help out in that capacity.
Wonderful. That's great.
Yeah, no, I'd like to continue as well. With that. The one thing, just to mention it now, is we've been successfully running the land registry workshop at the homestead for a while, which really we took about 2% of what Brian knows and distilled it into a very informative course. There's we did the introductory one, the intermediate one is upcoming as well. And if anyone has not taken that, would like to, please let me know, and we'll make sure we get you in there to do that. But it's a really good it's a really good preliminary training, certainly.
Yeah. Having those skills, it's like I love doing land registry research, and to have those skills and be able to look into any property is actually quite fun. So yeah.
Well, it's getting to be a lost art.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I also would like to do pictures and
Yeah.
drive-bys like Robert. Same.
Perfect. Okay, well, that's really great. I think, one thing that we can look at doing, like Andrew requested, I can send out an up-to-date list of the properties, their rankings, and just a little bit of information on them. And then maybe we can talk about some of the ones that we need photos for. And you can go out and take photos and send them back my way. And, we talk about some of the ones that need land registry research, and we can kind of pick uh, one or two just to get started in the pipeline for the new year. Yeah.
I know generally we're supposed to conduct business within the meeting. I presume it's okay to coordinate some of that and outside of the meeting.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Talk about
James,
who's going to do what and so on.
what's the requirement? What are the requirements there?
Yeah, technically everything is supposed to be within the meeting, but I think really it's more so we don't want to make decisions outside of the meeting, right? So if we're, if as a group you guys are determining whether or not a property should be designated or not, that's maybe not appropriate, but doing, organizing research and making sure that everybody is sharing information, I think is okay. It's more about the decision making that we want to kind of avoid, but it doesn't sound like that's really a concern here anyways. So yeah, I think in order for this group to function properly, I think we have to have some level of coordination, right? And unless we're unless we're doing weekly meetings at some point, which I don't think is palatable for anybody.
Necessary.
Yeah, I think it's fine for everybody to get organized outside of these meetings.
Because what I was thinking is we'll take a look at that list, what the higher priority ones are, try to select if there's a handful that do face some risk factors, and then prioritize those first and decide who's going to tackle what, and that just requires a bit of discussion, which obviously we don't want to wait till next month to have that basic conversation, right?
No, and I think too, like, Robert and Holly, depending on what part of town you're in at any given time or whatever, maybe you find 10 minutes, you're like, oh, I'm near a property, right? And you can just go and take some photos of it. And, so I don't know if necessarily like Robert and Holly's, if that's the role that they're going to take is taking photos. Sure, it'd be great if they, if we prioritize and told them, go out and do them. But if they just happen to be in a neighborhood where they're like, oh, there's one on our list, why not tackle it while you're there, right? So, yeah, because we do have 2 and a bit years, so and so if we can get a bunch of work done while it's convenient to people, then why not, right? So
Yeah. Given the list and given your capacity, what all properties need to be documented. So yeah, at what point that happens is less important than the fact that it does. So
give us a list.
Yeah, we'll send you the list. I'll send you the updated list with the status, and you guys will have it. You guys can go out. It's wonderful. Good. And then just the last. So looking at, I'm not sure what we want to do here. Looking at either trying to get the information together to do those evaluations for 3 Elizabeth and St. Paul by the end of the year. Does that seem something that's doable, or should we make it for like January, February? I know that like Christmas is coming up and that people are busy, but I think if we set a goal now, just to have all the materials together and send it my way, and we can maybe put together the 906. I think that would be good for moving forward on those properties. What do you think?
I think the end of the year is very, very realistic, certainly for Elizabeth Street. And I think Brian's done a lot on St. Paul Crest. I'm actually looking forward to see what he's come up with, but I also can assist with that. If there's any information I might have that you would like, Brian, just let me know.
Yeah, and I've got a month of enforced vacation time coming from ASI. So
They're making you take a break.
they're telling me use it or lose it.
Oh
So
yeah.
I've got a bit of time coming up, so it shouldn't be a problem for me for end of year.
That's great. I don't know, Robert or Holly, if you wanted to go out to 3 Elizabeth and get us, either of you wanted to go out and get those updated photos. And then you can email them to me, or we can organize a way of getting them to me. And so by the end of the year, does it seem like a reasonable goal too?
Like to go visiting.
Yeah, you can go visiting. We're perfect. Good. Wonderful. That's good. Okay, so that sounds great. We can move those forward and get all those materials together so that I can do the 906 evaluation. It's Wonderful.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I wasn't sure if you wanted to go through the properties that we had identified as priorities, but it sounds like we're going to be sending out the list and everyone's going to be going through it at their own pace and looking at it individually. And we'll have those conversations and kind of coordinate the research and the documentation of those outside of the meeting. So I don't know if there's
If you
anything
have that available, I wouldn't mind going through it, just do a quick
Yeah, we can do it.
walkthrough of it. We do appear to
Absolutely.
have time
Yeah, yeah,
and so on.
yeah, absolutely.
But
Yeah,
I don't want to speak for everybody either. I don't know what everyone's.
yeah.
Yeah.
How's there? We can go through it. There aren't that many properties. We'll go through. So we have our highest scored, the first property, which is 325 Lake Shore, which is the Eco Park greenhouse, which is very interesting.
I'll
But
add
that's,
to that that's a city-owned property, so
yeah,
it's not a huge
low
priority,
risk.
even though we've ranked it #1. So
Yeah. There's also the Keg at 344 Glendale. Also not a high risk property. I don't think it's going anywhere, but obviously gorgeous and very interesting. So that's our second. 219 Merritt Street. I don't know anything about this property. I still have to learn. It's our third. 15 Welland Avenue, which James and I walked by the other day. Obviously, stunning, gorgeous building. It's our fourth rated. 38 Geneva with 2 Queenston, just a really nice block of buildings, also fifth rated. Everyone's going to be more familiar than me. I'm still getting up to speed on all these properties. 347 Lakeshore, a very interesting little cottage here. It's a tie for sixth, and also tie for sixth is 1660 St. Paul Street West. Wow, look at that gable. That's very nice. 7 to 7.5 Embassy for ninth. 180 Queenston, the church here. Not sure. I don't know what the risk factor is for churches in St. Catharines, like what kind of congregations, or if they are high risk properties or not. But I know in some places they are. 1 Welland Avenue, 11th.
Just a note on 1 Welland Avenue, that the
Hmm?
property in the background is 180 Ontario Street. That's the context of that, with the vacant lot in between, and there was a house in between.
Yeah.
In the not too distant past that did come down. So
So there's some concern
I
there.
just see that corner as a
Yeah.
highly desirable development corner. So I would
Yeah,
look
I
at
can see
both
that.
of those as having some degree of risk, to be
Of
honest.
risk. That's a great
They
point.
just approved a townhouse across the street, snuck into a little sliver of a lot directly
yeah.
across the street
Yeah, that's
on
amazing.
Ontario.
Yeah.
This is 46 Lake at 12th. Cute little cottage. Throw in Queenston. This is one of the properties that I'll take those. I'll flag these properties as properties that the property owner has indicated they don't have that interest. 123 Albert, also not interested. 260 Vine. Oh wow, look at that. It's 15th. 109 Albert. 37 Henrietta. 151 to 150 or 53 Welland. Here. 18th. There's that one on 80 Ontario Street that we're talking about. Also removed from the list. 97 Albert. 20th. 12.5 Elizabeth Street. Tied for 21st. Interesting to see what's there. 37 Elizabeth Street, also tied for 21st. And I don't know how close these properties are, but it may be useful to look at properties that are close to each other or have a shared context at the same time. Because they have shared information, and the evaluations can inform each other.
I have a fair bit of information on all the houses along Elizabeth.
Yeah.
12 to 12 and a half is very close to being across the street from 3, and I
Yeah.
think it's one that has merit. 37 is quite a ways down the street, but
Okay. Yeah. And yeah, like I say, I'm not as familiar where things are laid out, but when things are in a same context, it can be useful to evaluate them together. 82 Oakdale, also tied for 21st. There's 37 Elizabeth Street. Oh, the other way. 9 to 10 Elizabeth Street, 24th. 12 to 14 Montebello, 26. 10 Montebello. So those, like, again, it might be useful to evaluate those together. We could take the photos and do the research, together. 362 Queenston, 32nd. 96 Albert, 39th. 2 Michigan Street, 16 to 18 Niagara at 44th. And that's it of the list. So those are the properties that we've prioritized. I think it would be good to kind of consider, again, some of those things around risk and around, grouping evaluations. So, yeah, any questions about those or comments or anything to bring up?
just a quick note, 2 Michigan is for sale right now. And it's on the market, and also the Embassy one there, it's only 7 and 7.5, but there's a cluster of virtually identical structures right on that corner. We talked about potentially looking at them as a group rather than just the individual.
Yeah. I think that's a great point, a great idea. Yeah.
The Embassy properties too, there's one of those houses that had a fire on the back end of the house, which hasn't been repaired yet. There's just, plywood up on the windows and that. And exactly what Andrew was saying, like, I think that whole cluster of rubber factory buildings, we really should evaluate them together.
Mhm.
Yep.
Just because there's nothing like them in the city, except for this little grouping.
Mhm.
Yeah. Maybe we can, I can put that as a note, and I can maybe flag some of the properties that, could be or should be done together. And then when we go to tackle these, we can be like, okay, now we're going to do this kind of grouping of properties, and we can kind of focus on that too. Yeah. A lot of ways to go about this. Yeah, it's great.
Mhm. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thank you.
It's nice
So
to refresh the memory on what we were looking at.
yeah, I think that's I think the whole point of this meeting is to kind of, get everyone refreshed and kind of get that energy back and start to work on some of these now that we have this actually doable and reasonable timeline. So thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Good.
For sure. All right. So, anything else on the next steps update? No. Right. So, move on to number 8, business arising from the minutes. I don't think there is any, so I think we're set there. Any items of correspondence? No. Okay. So second to last order of business is the date for the next meeting, which we have as November 15th, 2024. Are we going to assume the same time as today? Does that work for everybody?
I think
Works for me. Yeah.
I think I kind of arbitrarily chose 2:30, but it looks like you were meeting at 2. I don't know if 2 or 2:30 works better for everybody. I'm good either way, but does that make sense? 2:30? Okay. No, that's great.
We'll change it up. We'll put the Lauren stamp on it. We're doing your way, not James's
A
way.
new planner, new time. Yeah.
James is out. You're in. It's 2:30 from now on.
Just
Perfect.
commit.
There you
It's fine.
There you
Okay.
go. There you go. Wonderful.
And then the last order of business is to adjourn. Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn? Polly
Okay.
and Robert agreeing. Polly moves to the St. Catharines Heritage Advisory Committee designation subcommittee meeting be adjourned at 3:36 p.m. And all in favor?
I'm not.
Well, Ryan is outvoted 3-1. The motion carries against his wishes, and we're officially adjourned.
Thank you, everyone, for
Thank
the
you,
lovely
everyone.
meeting. Yeah. I'll
Pleasure
great
to meet
weekend.
you.
everybody. Yes. Seeing you in a couple weeks. Yeah. And I'll send her out that list, and it'll be great. Appreciate it.
Terrific.
Thanks, everybody. It's
Great
good to
job,
see everybody
Lauren.
again.
Thanks. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate it. Bye. Happy weekend.